Friends, thank you very much for the wonderful response I got for the last two episodes, which we have dealt with the intellectual fervor in classical India coming in from even more greater ancient times. And we were talking about Vasubandhu and Komarilla Bhatt and some others like Dharmakriti and all. And Kumarilla Bhatt and Vasubandhu were separated by 200 to 400 years. So it depends upon which source of history you look at, but that's the difference between the two. But we have in any case dealt with the brilliance of all the people and how they engaged with each other and how it was a continuous practice in this knowledge society. Today, let's, when we're talking about Kumarilla Bhatt, we must remember that Mandana Mishra, who engaged in one of those very famous debates with Adi Shankara, Mandana Mishra was a disciple of Kumarilla Bhatt. Actually, Kumarilla Bhatt was the guru of Mandana Mishra. But then before we get on to that particular debate, let's first slightly deviate a bit to look at the most celebrated philosopher in the Western world in the 20th century. And that was Ludwig Wittgenstein. Ludwig was born in Austria, Vienna, in the 20th century. He was youngest of in his family with four of his brothers, ahead of him, of which all four committed suicide, and two of them because they didn't agree with their father, who wanted them to work in the industrial world. And they're a very wealthy family though. But anyway, young Wittgenstein took a fancy to philosophy, and he learned the rules of logic under Bertrand Russell. And it so fired him up that he decided to join the World War I, where he thought facing death every day will probably bring him closer to what the truth is that he's looking for. And it is believed that in the trenches of World War I, he scribbled many notes, which after the war he came out and then he actually wrote a book called Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus. It's all about atomized logic. And he would actually not publish anything for a long time because he always thought that he was not ready, because he must not write something that is not correct. And he must find the ultimate truth and only then publish it. It is understood that even Bertrand Russell, while talking to him, would take notes because so that he might use it for posterity. Anyway, he came out with a book, and that book had various responses, but then he went on to become a teacher. But then the debate around the book again kindled the spirit in him, and he came back to philosophy. And he wrote a lot of, he wrote a lot of notes and whatever. But from those notes, again, a lot of philosophy has been written down. His essential core was that he felt that the current language was not at all appropriate for philosophical discussions, because the language had a lot of faults. So he always thought that the language needs to be perfected so that the names given to objects are in themselves misleading and are used in different contexts by different people. So he felt that, like, for example, we'll say the word love. I mean, in the English language, you only have one word for love, which could be the love between a husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend. It could be the passionate love. It can also be love between siblings, love between parents and children, loving thy neighbor. So it's just one word. So it can be construed in different ways. Whilst you must remember, Sanskrit has 96 words for love. So what he was looking for was a very precise language, and he felt that that was a problem because most problems came out of that. And he called these kind of philosophers as armchair detectives. Means the detectives search for truth. So they are armchair fellows who sit there and don't go and actually understand the objects, but then they investigate. And this, for example, he would say that The bees would make honey, and mankind interprets honey being good for themselves, and so they think that the bees do it for them, and they would like to thank the bees, but the bees would in return would sting you. So he says the honey is honey, must be seen as it is, not in the context of our needs. So he always looked at problems in that fashion, where he would take the language out of it and then look at the mathematics behind the problem, and then he would try and understand the system behind it. And he reckons that once you understand that, the problem is dissolved. Now, why am I talking about this man? Because when he died in 1951, he said, "Tell them I have lived a wonderful life." And this is one of the greatest philosophers of the 20th century from the Western world. Now you can imagine how he was constrained by language, and you must understand Sanskrit that way has been the very name itself. It means that from all the spoken streams, it was put together as the most scientific and the most specific language in order to overcome this. Also, the rules of debate in nowadays, if you look at any of these discussions of philosophy, I mean, the common man would understand nothing out of it. There are such words that are used; it makes it almost superfluous. But then, in classical India, in the ancient India, or in the Sanskrit debates, the very basic rules were that if a debater often used words that were personalized, that he knew only and the others did not understand it as he knew it, or the words were too difficult for the general public to understand, he could be cautioned by the moderator, and upon multiple times, if he makes that error, he can even be disqualified from the debate. And also, the debate was not about any esoteric things. It was meant that even though it was esoteric, it was in such a manner that it had to be for the larger good, for the public good. It had to have some relevance for the public. So these are very much in the public domain, these debates. And when you had these debates, one of the rules was that once you put forward a position, the opponent also then has to repeat your position in such a manner that he is exactly understood you, so that he explains it in as convincing a manner as you do, and then he counters it with his own narrative on it. That's how the debate sometimes even lasted very long periods, like the one between Shankaracharya and Mandan Mishra. They believe it lasted for more than 21 days because the debates would go on, and the public took a lot of interest in it. Now, while these were the rules of debate that were set about, we understand, coming back to the Kumarilla Bhatt, Vasubandhu, and the golden period of Indian history, it was a time where Buddhism, Jainism, and so many streams of thought, including the various schools of Hindu philosophy, constantly were at each other, trying to understand the truth behind the whole meaning of life. And this is where now in history sometimes it is positioned as if the Hindu overlords kind of pushed the Buddhists away, and there were some atrocities which are absolutely rubbish. Because you can see the kind of debates happening. It is just that in India, when these debates occurred, like particularly when Shankaracharya took on the Buddhist thoughts, what were the three main tenets of Buddhist thought at that time? And I'm no specialist, and with all due apology, not that these are available in clear records, but these were gleaned from the various thought processes by various scholars. The three pillars of Buddhist thought is that, number one, that there's reincarnation, but there's no soul. The reincarnation is almost like you get a mango tree from the seed of another mango tree. So the mango tree that has come from the earlier mango tree is not a reincarnation of the other mango tree. It's not the soul traveling from one to the other. It's just a reincarnation happening because of interdependent origination. So there's no individual soul as such. And the Buddhist second pillar was that this entire universe is an illusion and impermanent. Nothing is permanent here. So when it all ends, what actually remains is nothingness. It's zero, absolute zero. This is the second point. The third part is that because if you really think like this, when you go back to say, all right, if everything was caused by some other events, and you go back and back and back in time, there must be some beginning. What about that? And the Buddha said, do not argue about the beginnings. Let that be as it is. Take the universe as it is available. Accept it as it is there. And not to go into serious philosophical discourses. These were the three main tenets on which the Buddhist thoughts were going around. So how Adi Shankara and his ilk countered these was, firstly Adi Shankara said, when you say there's no soul and everything is impermanent, he says, but there must be something that's permanent to know that the entire thing, everything else is impermanent. And also because in us, you see, as our senses experience the universe, then it's our mind that focuses on some things and registers them. Then our buddhi or intellect interprets it as beneficial, not beneficial, good, bad. And then there is somebody inside your chitta who experiences it and finds the same thing, experiences it differently compared to somebody else. And that chitta or that internal being that is experiencing it is the soul. And he positioned that this soul is the only permanent thing, and that is why we understand that there is the whole, everything else is impermanent. Otherwise, if nothing is impermanent, if everything is impermanent, how would you ever know that? Because even you are perishing, so how would you know that somebody else is permanent or not permanent? So this was one thing for which he established the need for the soul. And then he went on to say, with regards to when everything else perishes, they said there is nothingness. And he said that no, this soul is imperishable. And because this soul belongs to the super consciousness, the super conscious soul, the Brahman, and the Brahman is indivisible. So this soul is actually a part of that Brahman. It's our ego that makes us feel we are different, we are individualistic. The moment the ego disappears, you're part of the same Brahman. And it said that if everything has to be zero, mathematically, from absolute zero, nothing can come. But yet the Buddhists believe that the whole universe is around there to experience. Even though it is impermanent, but it has come into being. So if it has come into being, then if something has come into being from something that is zero, is impossible. So if something could come from a zero, then that zero is not a zero, but it's the Brahman, the super consciousness. It stays in a state of lull at the beginning of the universe when it seems it's all zero. But that super consciousness which is pregnant with the whole universe has to be the Brahman. So that is how he established the Advaita philosophy of the Brahman. And then the fact that we are a reflection of that Brahman, and that is the soul within us. Lastly, coming on the points of philosophy, he positioned that philosophy, you have your Mahayana schools, the Hinayana schools, you have the Vimsatikas, you have the Yogacharas. So philosophy is a search for knowledge and understanding. So since you are doing it, you are anyway not following your Buddha. So that is how he said that he kind of countered the Buddhist philosophy. And this thing then caught the popular imagination so wildly that Bharatvarsha moved beyond Buddhism and once again embraced the Vedic thoughts of Vedanta and the Advaita and the Dvaita philosophies and all the other schools. Whilst some of the eastern parts of Asia, wherever else Buddhism spread, has remained as it is with the Buddhist thoughts. They had come to India and borrowed a lot of books and taken it back to be able to do that. This is how he established Hinduism back again, and Hinduism once again caught the imagination of the people and became much, much mainstream compared to Buddhism. And Buddhism slowly faded in India. But then, of course, there were other schools like Mimamsa, etc., like people like Mandana Mishra. Now, Mandana Mishra, he lived in the place called Mandaleshwar, which is near Indore. It's on the banks of Narmada. Today, we even have a city in Madhya Pradesh by his name after him. And Mandaleshwar's debate, some people reckon happened in Varanasi, some people reckon it happened in Mandaleshwar, because it was Shankaracharya who went and took him on, because he was a great proponent of the Mimamsa school of thought of karmic duties and piousness. He again, like Kumarilla, had a large tracts of land. He lived very well with himself and his wife, and they did many acts of piety and everything. And then they were great proponents of Mimamsa school. But once again, we do not have the intricate details of the debate as to how it happened, but we do have these details that the debate carried on when ultimately the judge itself was Ubhay Bharti, Mandan Mishra's wife, and Mandana Mishra lost the debate, and having lost, he converted to Shankaracharya's Advaita philosophy, and the Advaita philosophy, and then it is also reckoned that the four schools or the mathas that Adi Shankara established, one of them was headed by Mandana Mishra as Sureshwaracharya. But there is some conflict here, not entirely established. But the first Shankaracharya of the Sringeri Math was Sureshwaracharya. But there are some people who believe that Sureshwaracharya was a different person from Mandana Mishra. But be that as it may, his wife then continued the debate with Shankaracharya, and then there are certain legends around that which most of you are aware, so I will not repeat them out here. But this is how the intellectual fervor continued in India, and it continued till the time. Though again, I must caution here that Shankaracharya, as per the Puranic records, was somewhere in the 400 to 600 BC, whilst in the Western records and as Pindologists they reckon it's in the 600 AD or 7th century after AD, etc. Now these are as it is, but let us just glean the knowledge from it and understand. Leave it to specialist historians to still uncover and find the ultimate truths as to when exactly these happened. But then this is where was all the golden period, when slowly we had different systems and different attacks and invasions coming into India, and how those slowly changed the entire polity and social setup of India, we shall discuss in the coming episodes. I hope all of you have enjoyed this, and you will continue to do your own research and be able to add to whatever you have so far understood. Thanks very much once again. Thank you for listening to me.